Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode number 2 of CFESA's official podcast, Service Hero Toolbox. Excited about this episode. It's the first time since I've taken over the show and Nick has taken over the show that we have a special guest coming on. And you all probably know him already. He's infamous across the industry, has been on every podcast known to man. And he's going to bring a ton of value to us today. And so I hope everybody is paying attention. But Mr. Gyner, Ozgul, welcome to Service Hero Toolbox, and we're excited to get started, man.
Thanks, Josh. That's quite the intro. Infamous, my name, all in the same sentence. So
I know, and I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah, you did. You did. I'm impressed. Hey, just like 2 seconds on me. Gyner Ozgul. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Smart Care Equipment Solutions. Been in the industry now for a little over 20 years, actually. Started as a service manager in Chicago 20 years ago, and just like a lot of others in this industry, you have to become a jack of all trades. So was a parts guy for a while, a sales guy for a while. But my heart has always been in the service operations side of things. It's where I take joy. Every single time I get a technician call, I would literally hang up on other folks to take that call. It's just so much more fun to talk to our technicians than it is anyone else. But we're currently, we're a nationwide service provider, an active member of CFESA, as both of you know, and totally enthused about being here and talking to you guys today.
Awesome, man. Well, we're excited to talk to you also. So for the topic of discussion today, the entire show is going to focus around something that I think every service company out there right now, both in CFESA and out of CFESA, is going to be excited to hear about. It's technician development, right? Mm-hmm. Especially in this economic climate that we're seeing. Technicians coming in, it's just so much more important that we take these guys and we groom them into, these A players that we typically talk about. So that's kind of setting the stage for what we want to talk a little bit about today. So we're going to jump right into it and just kind of get your take high level, of what this role of a technician looks like in this day and age, and what kind of skill set are we looking to achieve?
Yeah. So if you would ask me that question 10 years ago, it was totally different, right? For all of us. Mm-hmm. Today have to be the combination. There's like 3 skill sets, I like to say, as opposed to, before the skill set was all about the diagnosis and repair competency, right? That was what we all looked and focused on. But like the additional competency of the soft skills of managing in front of our technicians who have evolving needs and evolving expectations is a competency. And then technology itself, right? We're all putting some mobile solution in front of them and they're having to manage expectations with customers with portals and filling out work orders different ways. So now not only do they have to be great at the repair itself, they have to be great at managing the customer and great at the technology that enables the first 2. So it's a very complex role. It's getting more complex for the technicians, and is in my conversations with technicians, very stressful at times for them, to be quite honest. I mean, they have a lot of passion in that first bucket, like, let me just fix stuff. I'm really good at doing that. But they acknowledge the second 2 buckets are becoming bigger and a more impactful part of their jobs.
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have. I think I can speak for everyone, when I say that. I've seen that in my company as well, explaining to these technicians that have been in the industry for a while that, hey, your job is no longer just to go in, fix the equipment and leave. Your job is to go in, fix the equipment, abide by all the customers' procedures, whether or not they use a CMMS provider. You've got to get that into, your rotation as well, which brings the technology into it, right? And sooner or later, they're just, it's overwhelming, right? So, which is why this development piece is so important. One of the reasons, and so that leads me perfectly into the next question. Why else is this, development so important right now?
Well, we are competing for this talent. First of all, the overall workforce is slowing down, getting smaller. We all know that. It was a problem before the pandemic. It's a worse problem after the pandemic, right? And as such, we're competing with very valuable needs of competent technicians with other industries and other adjacencies, automotive, electronics. There's just so many different areas they can go and get interested in. So for us to be able to build differentiation and value and culture into our trade and attract that talent to come to work here is like really important for us. And if you're going to build value, then they have to resonate with, not only your organization, the family values or the culture that you're building, but also with what your meaning is of what we do. What do we enable in society? They want something more. They want a vision of how we resonate differently. I tell just building on that for a second, I had somebody in an elevator a number of weeks ago. I was talking to a customer, and they just wanted to joke with me because we were on a long elevator ride for like 30 seconds. And they said, give me your elevator pitch. What do you guys do? And I said, do you like to go to dinner with your family? And they're like, yeah, of course I like going to dinner with my family. I go, why do you go to dinner with your family? Well, we want to celebrate, or I go home from a long business week and I want to like reconnect with my family, and it's a nice time for us to all get away and connect. And I said, great. I go, when you're at dinner with your family, do you have something on the menu you typically like? And of course he said yes. And I said, so how do you feel if the server comes back and says, I can't make that today because something's wrong in our kitchen where I can't make that your favorite menu item as you're spending time with your family? And they're like, I don't really feel good. Then I have to order something else. It kind of distracts me and takes me away from the whole meaning of being with my family. And I said, that's what we fix. We don't fix the equipment, we fix that experience, right? And there's a lot of meaning in that, right? And it's interesting. He got off the elevator and he looks at me and he goes, no one's ever presented it to me that way. And I said, that's how valuable the work our technicians do is, right? And every customer, there's a similar story, right? It's the menu that the nutritionist has to create in a hospital for all the patients, and how they work with the doctors in terms of that menu to help them heal faster, right? So when that kettle's down, then they got to rework the menu and figure out some different nutritional needs. We're fixing that. We're not fixing the kettle. We're fixing the ability for those patients to heal correctly, right? And helping our technicians understand the importance of their work is really important for us. And I, it's something I've been talking about a lot more with our technicians recently, right? And driving value to the importance back to them, so they see the importance for newer generations of coming into this industry, and why there's so much passion in this industry and why we're so important and relevant.
Yeah, dude, that's a good word. I'll say that, when you're attracting this talent too, these guys need to know what winning looks like. Talented people want to win. And, just like there's 32 different football teams in the NFL, they all want to win, but they all have a different approach, right? And you're just trying to tell your story seemingly of, hey, if you match this character, if these values are attractive to you, then this is what winning would look like at SmartCare. And I really do think that's how we're going to attract talent from other people who are saying, hey, you're going to come here and you're going to do plumbing. I think we've got a better advantage with the story that you just told in the elevator to attract some really cool people in the coming years.
Yeah. And look, it's not a stretch in the narrative. It's really what we do. I mean, if you think about it, that's what we do. When we go to McDonald's and their fryers are down and they can't serve French fries, and everything you ever hear about them is about how their French fries are what people go to McDonald's for, we're solving for that customer experience for McDonald's, right? And trying to change the narrative from we fix broken things to our technicians enable outcomes and experiences for our customers, and the work that they do is that valuable, will change the way we approach and talk to new potential technicians in the future.
That's fantastic. So I'm gonna issue a challenge right now to our listeners, to our audience, to listen to what Gyner just said, rewind the episode if you have to, and challenge yourself to come up with this same style elevator pitch, but framed as a different way to provide value, right? Because that's one of the tangible steps that we can create as an industry to attract the right people and to shift that mindset to, something higher than, hey, we just fix equipment, or hey, we just fix toilets or, whatever it is. I mean, there's a higher purpose here, and it's our job as the ones in the industry to bring that to light. So that's my challenge, my first challenge to listeners. I have a feeling this is going to become a thing, so stay tuned.
It is. And look, what goes with that is what I'll call the meat and potatoes behind that is we got to get really good at training these technicians as they come in. Our highest turnover rate is in our year one techs. And I'm sure I've talked to enough companies in the CFESA family of industries that they have similar challenges, right? It's you get the new person in the door, and how do you get them to feel good about the job to stay? And once they stay that first year, they're here. What we see with the turnover rate is in year 2 on, their turnover rates just drastically drop off. They're incredibly loyal once you get them on solid footing after they first start for you. And part of doing that, we also have the headwind of technology has interest with younger generations, right? They're always on their phones. They want to feel like technology is a vital part of the job that they do, right? And as we try to attract newer generations into the industry and diversity, to be quite honest, into the industry, we have to make technology a core part of what we do and a core part of the training too, right? We have to give them the tools to deliver a solid customer experience. Like the first time I said, here's our elevator pitch, or here's the narrative of what we do, in order for them to do that confidently, a 1-year tech has to be able to perform the same level of good service as a 20-year tech. And the only way they're going to bridge that is if we take the little notebook that the 20-year tech has in his pocket and somehow figure out a way to enable technology to give the 1-year tech access to that knowledge, right? And it could be, there are tools out there like FaceTime, as simple as that, and giving them access to other technicians to talk to and, hey, help me diagnose this remote. It could be as sophisticated as using data to drive some level of, helping them with steps of diagnosis and repair. But somewhere in there, depending on where a company is in their own journey, if we're really going to bring talent in, newer talent, we have to make technology part of our value offering to them to attract them in. This is how we use technology to help you do your job better and how we think progressively about the industry and moving it forward.
Yeah, and I'll say that your one of your teammates over there at SmartCare, Mr. Robert Harris, is kind of a thought leader on the board right now in regards to creating a tech pathway. You hire the right guy, obviously stay into the culture. He's going to be there. All right, how do we help this person become the best version of themselves in the role that they sit in our organization? And he's really squeezing us to come up with a practical way to develop that, not only as an association, so that how do we partner with it, but also to hand to our member companies to say, here's the blueprint, here's how you do, here's the 4 stages of development. And that's really encouraging to have him around speaking into those things as well, because Robert's an asset, man. He's a great guy.
Yeah, totally agree. And, we have pushed ourselves internally on how are we, look, our challenge is unique, but it's a representation of the challenge of the industry at large too, right?
I agree.
Just because we're a large scaled organization, the amount of techs we have to hire every year gets bigger and bigger. But the industry also has that same problem, right? Whether it be one company or 100 companies, you all have to hire the same amount of technicians, right? And our challenges aren't unique to SmartCare. They're challenges that are for the entirety of the industry that we have to solve for. And if we can bring visibility to the industry via, better optics socially on what we do and what value we offer our customers in those experiences, and we show technicians that we're moving to more of a progressive approach with technology, we will attract talent into the industry that we don't today, right? I'm confident about that. And to be quite frank, we'll bring visibility to an industry that's been lacking visibility and respect for many, many years.
Preach.
We need to bring that respect and visibility to this industry in general.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you guys know me, right? I mean, I want these industries to be on a pedestal, right? And I want to bring honor and reverence back, which is why, one of the reasons I agreed to do this podcast, Nick, is so we can help with this. So you had mentioned that the highest turnover that you see is in year one, which I think that's a big takeaway for the audience, because we can learn from this, right? So one of my first questions here is, why do you think that turnover is so high in year one? And I'm going to have a follow-up question to that, but I want to hear your answer first.
A combination of things. Like, do I think a little bit of the interviewing has to improve? Yes. Like, I'll hold that. I think the bigger problem is, as we onboard the technician, once we hire them, the experience of just putting them in a truck with someone else and saying, hey, go right along, and all this will, through osmosis, you'll become a good technician in the industry, just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
We're all guilty of that too, huh?
You ain't kidding.
Yeah, it's like, look, this isn't salt water going into fresh water. This isn't it doesn't work that way. And we're expecting these guys 2 weeks in, we give them a tool bag and we say, hey, go fix a combi oven. And it's like, yeah, okay, some of them get lucky and do a really good job. And I want to give the listeners credit for that, right? But most of them are like, damn it, give me the right tools. And tools here aren't physical tools. Yes, some of that might be physical tools, but tools here are, give me a little bit of experience to understand what you're expecting me to go do. And we don't build, I've challenged our team internally, to be really frank, this year, to build an onboarding process that really takes the technician through a number of months, let's just say, after we hire them, not only learning the culture of the business, the culture of their team, how to use the applications, but more importantly, like, where do we want them to start on the work trajectory and where do we want them to end, right? And then at the end of that, how do we assess them to say, here's what they're good at, so we can lean in on that, and what they need work on, we build a path to train them on, right? So you don't put them in front of some native pieces of equipment and they're just like, what am I doing here, right? And you get enough of that. If you're a year one tech, you do that 2, 3, 4 times, you're like, I'm not doing this. This isn't for me.
Yeah.
This customer's yelling at me over my shoulder because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, even though I'm telling them I know what I'm doing. And I get that enough, and I figure out this isn't the right industry for them. And it's a travesty, because some of them could be really good techs for us. We just haven't given them the opportunity to be successful.
I'm going to play the part real quick of a really small company, right, that's coming up in the ranks, and they're going to look at you, Gyner, and they're going to say, well, how am I supposed to make this investment as a small company? How am I supposed to, invest in months of training, for somebody like this? How do I do that?
Yeah. So I will say the P&L problem you're referencing is the same in a big company as a small company. If you look at your turnover churn, the cost of 5 techs turnover on you in a year versus the cost of just, and what you're really trying to do is fill 2 spots, let's just say, with that turnover, versus hiring those 2 guys earlier in the year and investing in their training and onboarding and just keeping them and not having the 3 incremental costs of turnover, like recruiting, and that churn offsets itself. Yeah. And what you get is a more loyal employee technician at the end of it anyway. So I would just say the P&L is really a push. You have to get yourself, you have to step out and really be critical of how much money you're spending on all that churn anyway, and say, if I slow down the churn, and this is a push, right? Don't be ambitious to try to say I'm going to save money by doing better training. Just say it's a push on your P&L. But what I create is more loyal technicians in the long run.
Absolutely. And I want to just clarify that, right, for any company that's listening that is smaller, because I chose to use smaller companies for a reason, and that's exactly the answer I was hoping you were going to give. I know you a little bit, Gyner. Thank goodness for that. But this is important, because sometimes those smaller companies, 5, 6 technicians, they haven't experienced that turnover like some of the larger or longer tenured companies have, right? So they don't exactly know what that impact is. So I want you to listen carefully to what Gyner just said and understand that that's coming from experience, right? And as you continue to grow your company, this is going to become more and more evident. So if you heed this advice now and begin developing and training these technicians now, that's a huge expense that you can avoid in the future that several of us, probably all of us on this call, didn't have the luxury of avoiding. Yeah. Right. So really, really great information there, Gyner. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd say the other thing for smaller companies, we all have the same problem in capacity today, in today's environment. We all say, if I only had X more technicians, I'd have X more business, right? It's a comment we all make. The numbers you can plug, depending on how big or small you are, right? So the thought there is, like, unwrap yourself from the hypocrisy of that statement to say, I don't want to hire anybody, but I have this problem where I have more business than I can handle. Well, take this investment of hiring someone now to unlock the business that you have waiting for you, right? If you have conviction that that business is real and there's a need for your customers, then investing in technicians now will pay off really, really quickly right after he's ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we talked about, the importance of the interviewing, the onboarding. One of the things that I've identified, and you can confirm or deny if you've seen the same thing, is that one of the indicators of a great technician or a potential A player, as we call them, right, is the ability to be teachable. And so I'm wondering from you, what identifying factors should we look for in a technician to indicate that they have this teachable switch, if you will?
When I used to interview technicians, I always start with that because it's hard to relay everyone else's experience, but I can relay mine. I would always talk about with a technician, like, what does he like to do? Just give me a little bit of your life story. Like, just let him download. And if you start to hear things like, hey, I help the guy at the bowling alley a couple times a week, and I fix his equipment not his kitchen equipment, just he's a general helper of his buddy, or he builds cars in his off time, or I don't know, he helps at the church with building a new roof. Or if you start to pick up on the nuances of them personally, what you start to understand is there is a person there that has a competency to want to solve a problem. If you can identify that competency, teaching them how to fix a fryer is something we can navigate to. All of us can, right? But you got to allow them to download with you a little bit more than just doing the interview of, well, tell me what kind of electrical equipment you fixed in your career. Well, one of our most successful technicians in Chicago, he got hired like 20 years ago. And I remember when we hired him, because my service manager at the time did the interview, and he came to me and he was just adamant we shouldn't hire this guy. And I met the guy for coffee not far from my house. And he was just telling me this story of, he had all these jobs. He had this local KFC franchise that he was a handyman for. And then he worked at a couple of golf courses. And then he was working at this hospital fixing their water filtration system. And, he's telling me his life, right? And I'm like, this guy is going to be a great tech, not a good tech. He's a great tech. Because if you just hear his narrative, he has passion for figuring out problems and solutions. And he's really good at talking to different customers, right? If you think he's not thinking of it that way, but I am. So you got to let them download with you a little bit and be patient in the conversation to understand them, the person, as much as you are trying to understand them, the technician.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm going to issue a challenge number 2 then to our listeners, right, and our audience. Take a look at how you're conducting your interviews, right, and the questions that you're asking. Are you focusing on highlighting their competency for solving problems? Is this something you're looking for? If not, again, heed Gyner's advice and alter however you do these interviews to make sure that that's the information that you're extracting. Because I tend to believe with you, right, or believe you that people with a passion or desire to solve a problem are going to be the most teachable, because they just want to get to the answer, right? They just want to know how to do it. So that's really great. Awesome. So then all this talk about, A players, and I'm a firm believer that A players don't have to have the skill set when the technical skill set when you identify that they are A players. That's kind of evident in what you just said, Gyner. So how do we take somebody who's green, right? With regard to skills, they have the character, they have this competency to learn, and how do we develop them into what we would call the typical A player, where they hit those three skill sets that you mentioned at the beginning of the show: competency, soft skills, and technology. What does that path look like?
Yeah, for me, like there's like two paths in parallel there. One is start with putting them in less pressure scenarios to gain confidence. So things like PMs, small repairs on coffee makers, things where they're building their confidence over time, right? And in parallel to that is pick what I'll call a specialty repair need in your business that you're trying to address where you're deficient right now. I don't know, ice machines, combi ovens, and just teach them that skill really, really well to start, right? Because that will add to their confidence. It will get them very good in an area you need for your business, but also they'll develop broader competencies in learning something a little more specific to start, right? The approach of diagnosis becomes a little better. The approach of understanding electrical currents becomes a little better, or steam, right? So don't try to solve the whole world with your new technician on day one, right? PMs, get confidence, learn what you're doing first, give them maybe something a little more specialized as an aside, because you want to build the stronger competency, and let a little bit of that natural evolution happen versus trying to say, I'm going to make you a generalist. I'm going to teach you all these skills in 6 months and you're going to be an A player. I think you set them up and yourselves up for disappointment when you do that. And you actually slow the rate of what that person can do for your organization by not just stepping back and saying, I have enough work I can give them that, by the way, will free up my more experienced technicians to go do the more experienced calls, right? I'll let him do the less experienced calls so he gains confidence, and I'll train him on something a little more specific that I need for my business so he can gain confidence.
Yeah, that just sounds like good leadership, man, and just like protecting people that you care about. It reminds me of my daughter right now. She just made the varsity team as a 9th grader on the basketball team, and she's a really good shooter. And so like I'm really working with her on continuing to develop that shooter skill set, like the catch and shoot, the triple fake, and that's all we're focusing on. Now, sometimes when she gets in the game, they'll steal the ball from her really quick and she can't handle it very well. But it's like, hey, let's focus on shooting the ball really, really well, because in basketball, you have to score. But, I wouldn't carry her to the YMCA, to the men's league, and say, hey, get in the game. I'm going to put you in the paint. You need to work on your post moves today, because she probably never want to play basketball again if some sweaty 50-year-old man banged her around, So but I understand in a palatable way what you're saying is put people in a spot where that they can win and they can build some confidence in doing some core things, and then they're going to fall in love with the sport in general and want to get good at all of it.
Right. And look, at the end of the day, if we're going to solve our broader kind of staffing of bringing techs in the industry, our greatest advocates are going to be the technicians themselves, right? So if we invest the time in the newer techs, do a really good job of onboarding them, do a really good job of training them, give them the confidence, build the culture in the industry and the visibility, those technicians will bring in more technicians into the industry.
Yes.
Right? It's a little bit of a virtuous cycle once you start it, do it, right? In our business, our largest recruiters are a tech base. They recruit 40% of all the technicians we hire at SmartCare. So getting technicians to bring in technicians is like vitally important. And the only way you're going to do that is to make them very confident that this is a job they would refer a friend to come work at.
Yep. Same at Sam Service, probably 50% for us.
Yeah, no, same here too. And if anyone's ever heard my talk on the people predicament, you know that I'm a big advocate for, if you can make your company into something that your employees brag about, that is your largest recruiting tool, not just with the technicians, but with the office staff too, right? And everybody involved in the organization. So really happy that you said that. It just cements that I'm not completely wrong.
Oh, you're more right than anything there, Josh. I've heard enough of your podcasts. I listen to them in my car quite often.
Oh, thanks, Gyner. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, back on track. All right, you made me smile. That's good. All right, so how do we measure this progress? I mean, we're talking a lot about developing these technicians and bringing them up on this path and onboarding over a few months. But how do we tangibly measure the progress?
Yeah, that one's a challenging question, right? Because I think, for us, progress is all about retention, right? We want, for SmartCare, it's how do we keep the techs we develop? That's a focused goal for us going into 2023. I've kind of challenged our team to really drive retention. The last couple of years coming out of the pandemic, it's all been about get more techs, get more techs, get more techs. And now it's, okay, now, yes, and we have to keep the ones we have, right? And we have to do a better job at that. So a little bit, for me, the measuring stick is retention. But I'd say the overall arching theme is, a qualitative piece would be the conversation of I need more technicians. When we go to conferences together and we talk about it, if we can start to squash that conversation where we're not talking about as much, to me, that means we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. But if we're going to continue to talk about it qualitatively, it means we're not moving the needle enough, right? Because that's the way to measure it, right? If 10 companies are in a room and 9 of them are still talking about needing more technicians, we still have the same problem. We haven't moved the needle enough, right?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of my answer to it. I think the other one is we have to push the visibility of the industry out. We need to. We all have, this is great, by the way. I love what you guys are doing here, Josh. And I know I made you smile, but there's truth in that. I think we need advocates in the industry more outward to help build the visibility. I think we tend to be an industry of inward focus a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. It builds camaraderie, and I think there's a lot of good things that we do, but we have to be able to go outwardly to the industry and expose ourselves a little bit more in order to build that visibility to bring in different talent into the organization.
Yeah, and to kind of kill a boogeyman too, I think a lot of our peers think of retention or losing a technician. They oftentimes immediately think, well, if I lose my tech at Sam Service, he's going to SmartCare or he's going to Windy City. That's not the case. They're going to be an electrician, or they're going to be a controller somewhere, or they're being asked into a leadership position at a completely outside. So it's not this thing that I think that there's a tendency to happen where it's like, well, I'm going to lose my tech to be doing the exact same thing he is. Like, no, man, you got to retain good people to this industry, and we need exposure to show that it's viable, and there's a pathway to success that far exceeds other industries if we're going to keep them.
Yeah, I totally agree.
No, absolutely. That goes back to Gyner, the point that you made at the beginning of this episode, that we're competing against now all the other trades, and not only all the other trades, but to Nick's point, parallel industries and industries that aren't even associated with I've had guys leave to go do security systems. I've had guys leave to go start gyms. It really is. It's making it more difficult, but I would argue that also makes us better. So, as long as we keep having conversations like this. So listen, I know it doesn't feel like we've been talking for 35 minutes, but we have. I still got a couple questions that I'm just super curious, and I know that listeners would really appreciate. So I'm going to try to cherry pick just maybe 2 more, if that's all right with everybody. So I'm really curious to know, we're going to spend all this time, and we're going to spend some money, and we're going to spend, a lot of resources on developing our technicians, which is largely justified, and great for us in the industry. How do we know if someone has reached their developmental limit? Is there a limit? How are we going to keep investing in them, or is there an indicator that says, hey, this person's tapped out?
I have conviction that they're never tapped out because you can always continue to hone the skills that they want, right? Because I do think there's a little bit of a, do I want to do more, right? And can they do more discussion to,
Sure.
bridging what you just said. For the ones that say, I've decided that I want to live in the parameters of what I've decided I want to live in, I think you need to hone them to be better at what they do, right?
Okay.
Because there's always an improvement factor for those technicians. For the ones that are at their limit, not because they choose it, but because we've acknowledged they have one, I just, because there are those, right? They're just, this guy's just
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
never going to be really good at refrigeration, right? I'm just like, I'm not taking a shot. It's
Yeah.
we all know that exists. I think for those techs, it's how do we have a really earnest discussion with them on what are they good at and how do we make them better at that then, right? So they could build value and confidence where they feel their strengths are. And I think for all of us, there's a challenge in that because we don't want to have those hard conversations because we feel like we'd be chasing them away potentially, right? And I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, sit down with the guy and just say, hey, look, do you really like this refrigeration work? Because you've had like 2 callbacks on it, and you called me one day and you were screaming at the top of your lungs outside. No, I don't. Okay, what do you like? I like doing, fryers and ovens, and keep me on the cooking side. And great. All right, so let's build a path for that, and that's what we'll have you do. I just think it's about having like really good conversations and building trust, and then the output of that is let me develop a path that's unique to that technician. But yes, I'd say whether that's self-choice or our observation, at some point they do hit a limit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to issue the challenge number 3 to our listeners and our audience to, if you have identified that person in your organization, do not be afraid to have that hard conversation respectfully, and face to face, but it will need to be had sooner or later, because otherwise I think that we risk putting the technicians in a position to get burned out, right? Because then it just kind of creates an animosity or a resentment on one side or the other, or possibly both, that doesn't get addressed. And we're talking a lot about retention, and I think this is just one of the many pieces in that. So my humble 2 cents on that. So I issue that challenge to the listeners. Definitely identify that. If it exists in your organization, confront it, and with the objective of exactly what Gyner just said. Last question. All right. So I'm curious, and I know that the listeners are too. What is one thing that we can do in our businesses right now to make the largest strides in developing our own technicians?
Spend time in the field really understanding what you're trying to fix, right? Because as it's easy to become removed from or have an observation of a problem that may or may not exist 1 or 2 steps above it. Like, really, if you really think you have a problem with training so many new technicians, then you just most of us have just hired a guy in the last couple of weeks, right? Go spend time with them and understand if that's really a problem, what the problem is, and understand it. I'd say that the takeaway for me is, don't assume the problem is what you think it is. Go validate that the problem is what it is. And the way you do that is go spend time with the technicians and understand it, and go solve the right problem.
Yeah, and it'd
That's
probably be
really
very fulfilling and encouraging as well, I'm assuming. And from a P&L standpoint, it's not going to cost you anything. You're paying yourself anyway. Why not heed some advice and go hop in a truck and learn something new? I mean, that's really pointing out a really practical, obvious thing that the listeners might could do, by the end of this week.
Yep.
That's a good work.
Absolutely. Tangible steps. I love it. Challenge number 4, if you will. So of the people on this call, how often do you guys get in the field?
I try to make it a point to get in the field a couple times a month. It's planned. Sometimes it's, I happen to be at home in Chicago, and I'll say where somebody's at and just go visit. Do what I'll call a swing by visit.
Nice.
I do a couple of things for me unique. I have town halls with our technicians twice a month. I don't invite any of the managers in the organization to those. It's me and the techs, period. The second thing I do is I make it a point for myself. I have a personal goal of calling 6 to 8 technicians a week and just checking in. It's a phone call. It's the most important thing of our business. So I do it. It's, are they long conversations? Probably not. They're sub 10, 15 minutes. But it's meaningful. I learn things in those conversations, like real, tangible business problems that we have that, I take away as the business leader that I have to go figure out, right? And it's not calling out their manager, any of that. Look, do I have some of that? Sure. It's more, hey, what am I learning about? Hey, the customers are buying these IoT things, and it's like, oh, wow, that happened faster than we thought it was going to happen. And now, because they're so close to it, you hear something different, right? So I would just say spend time in the field. It's very valuable, and you always get takeaways from it.
I like it. Nick, how about you? How often do you get in the field?
Not near as much as I need to. I'm sitting here pretty convicted right now. I wrote down a couple to-dos for myself to try to be a little bit more aggressive with it. I'm probably more like once every 6 months, and tricking myself into thinking I need to be solving some pretty hairy, grandiose issues that I might have the solutions to right in front of my face. So it's a good word.
Yeah, really great advice. All right, well, listen, we're going to move to close out this episode. I couldn't even fit all the value on one piece of paper front and back. So
yeah, I filled mine up too.
Yeah, I hope everybody listened to this episode, got some value out of it. I hope that you use it as a resource. Go back, rewind, pause, listen carefully to a lot of the advice that Gyner gave. It's really great and also tangible, something that we can all take away, implement in our own businesses as soon as possible, and be better for it. So that being said, Nick, is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to ask Gyner real quick. I know we got about 3 minutes. If you were an animal, what animal would you be and why?
Awesome.
A polar bear.
Nice. Why is that?
Yeah. So I could tolerate all this cold I have to live in.
I bet there's more depth to that answer if we dug in. If we had more time.
Oh man, that's good.
Oh, wait a second. You can't get away with it. So what would your animal be? What's your spirit animal, Nick?
You want to know what my spirit animal is?
Yes, I do.
I'm a rhinoceros.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And the reason why I'm a rhino is because I'm pretty chill most of the time, but everybody sees that big old horn and they know I can tear some shit up if I want to.
You also got armor plating.
Oh, that's good.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys. This is great. I appreciate it. Good luck with the future podcasts. And like to any of the listeners, I'm very accessible, so feel free to reach out directly if you have any questions. I'm always happy to talk and support the industry and our technicians to be successful. So thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming on, Gyner. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother.